Purdue point guard Braeden Smith is not an option for the Gonzaga Bulldogs next season, but Colgate point guard Braeden Smith is, and he might be the perfect final piece for Mark Few's team.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Happy Wednesday and welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by Monopoly Go. Folks, I admit it, I have a competitive side, and it is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go now free on the App Store or the Google Play Store. Well, folks, Gonzaga is reportedly interested in Colgate transfer point guard Braeden Smith. We're going to talk about that. The women's team also added a big-time transfer from St. Mary's. Love to see that. And we're going to close out the show talking about Chet, who finished second in NBA Rookie of the Year voting, which is totally okay with me. We'll talk about that and some Zags in the NBA playoffs. We are starting the show today talking about a potential guard transfer portal addition for Mark Few and the Zags. And frankly, folks, wasn't sure that was going to be a conversation we were going to have many more times, if at all, this offseason after Gonzaga added Khalif Battle from Arkansas last week. Gonzaga now has what appears to be a fully set 9-man rotation heading into next season. But there are rumors, reports, indications that Gonzaga is looking to continue to fill out their roster. They have filled 10 of their 13 scholarship spots. Last year, they had 11 scholarship spots filled. So it stands to reason that they would continue to fill out, at least continue to look to fill out that final roster spot. We kind of expected that any future additions might be in the front court, a developmental big. Again, you have three scholarship players leaving Gonzaga, and Anton Watson, Luka Krajinovic, Pavle Stosic. You've replaced two of them. You replace Watson with Michael Ajayi. You have replaced Krajinovic with Khalif Battle, and now Stosic is kind of the last piece to replace. But there are rumors that Gonzaga is currently pursuing Colgate transfer guard Braeden Smith. And again, not that Braeden Smith, not the starting point guard at Purdue, not one of the best point guards in all of college basketball. That doesn't make any sense. He has not in the transfer portal, wouldn't leave Purdue to come to Gonzaga to be a fourth guard, but Colgate's Braeden Smith, he might. Here's a little bit about him. He's a 6-foot point guard from Seattle. And I think that's the key there. He is a local kid. He went to Seattle Prep High School. Potentially, I don't know, looking at On3 and 24/7, he wasn't a highly regarded prospect out of high school, so I have no idea how much of a connection there may have been with Gonzaga at the time, if they pursued him, if he was interested in going to Gonzaga. But he went to a Jesuit Catholic high school in the state of Washington, so it stands to reason that there may have been some connection that happened there previously, but he wasn't highly pursued out of high school, ends up going to Colgate in the Patriot League and spent 2 seasons there with Colgate as a freshman. In the 22-23 season, Smith averaged 11.5 points, 4.5 assists, about 4 boards, and 1.3 steals. He was a very efficient scorer as a freshman as well, about 55% on 2-point shots, about 36% from 3 on just under 3 attempts per game, and he was about 82.5% from the free throw line. In fact, Smith was a finalist for National Freshman of the Year as a freshman from Colgate. And instead of entering the transfer portal after a prolific, dynamic freshman year, he stayed at Colgate for his sophomore year and built on basically all of those numbers. As a sophomore this previous season in college basketball, Smith averaged 12.5 points, 5.6 assists, 5.5 rebounds, and 1.9 steals. That is an increase in every possible statistical category for Braeden Smith from year 1 to year 2. Now, the efficiency did dip. He went from shooting about 54% on twos to about 46% as a sophomore. His three-point percentage dropped from 36 to 31. That went from 2.8 attempts per game to 4.8 attempts per game. So an increase in volume did not lead to an increase in efficiency. In fact, it led to a 5% decrease. Free throw percentage was down to 78.6, but that's still very good for him. He was named the Patriot League Player of the Year and put together some significant performances throughout the season. His second game of the year as a sophomore, they played Syracuse at Syracuse. And Braeden Smith had 14 points, 11 rebounds, and 8 assists, nearly put up a triple-double against a Syracuse team that was pretty good last year. They were not great, and they found themselves later in the year. They weren't great early in the year. Gonzaga fans know that. They played them in Maui, and it didn't go particularly well for Syracuse in that game. But still, for Braeden Smith to be able to nearly knock a triple-double on an ACC team is very impressive. He had 15 points, 12 boards, and 5 assists in the Patriot League championship game, a win over Lehigh, which pushed Colgate into the NCAA tournament, where they played Baylor in the first round. They lost that game, but that was not because of Smith. He had a solid game, 10 points, 4 boards, and 2 steals in that one. Smith entered the portal in late April, was one of the final players, or was entered on one of the final days you were eligible to enter the transfer portal. So as of right now, as I'm recording this in the afternoon on May 7th, we do not have a list of interested schools. We don't have a list of, usually you'll see on Twitter or on social media a few days after a player enters the portal, like the following programs have contacted so-and-so transfer, and it's a list of 8, 10, 15, 25 different schools, whatever it may be. That has not come out for Braeden Smith. It may not. That's not like a guaranteed requirement for players entering the transfer portal, but it does mean that as of right now, the schools that are interested in Braeden Smith is not a known list. We have heard rumors that Gonzaga is involved here. That is why we're talking about Braeden Smith. It's not just a random grab of a player's name out of the transfer portal. There is conversation, discussion amongst folks who are plugged into the Gonzaga program that this is a player that Gonzaga and Mark Few are looking at. Just speaking anecdotally, for schools that I think could be interested here as well, Washington obviously makes sense. He's from Seattle. He went to Seattle Prep. Danny Sprinkle, I don't know how much he would have seen him when he was coaching at Utah, or he was at Montana State for his for Smith's senior year in high school, and then he was at Utah State last year when he was at Colgate. So I don't know if there's any connection between Danny Sprinkle and Braeden Smith, but if there is, I could certainly see them trying to bring him to Washington. I've seen some Syracuse bloggers who've talked about him, probably because they watched him nearly put up a triple-double, and they thought, well, maybe that guy could come to our program and start doing that to other teams instead of doing that to us. I've also seen some Duke accounts talk about him, but I don't know that there's really any momentum besides just people throwing his name out there as a potential candidate for the Blue Devils. Obviously, they lost their starting point guard in Jeremy Roach. He entered the transfer portal and is now going to join Scott Drew and the Baylor Bears. But those are just some schools that make some sense that I've seen a few rumblings on. Don't really know the full scope of which programs may or may not be interested in landing Braeden Smith. But let's talk about what the fit looks like at Gonzaga. Braeden Smith would be that prototypical Aaron Cook, Gino Crandall type addition for Mark Few, because he would very clearly come in as the fourth guard. And as we talked about on recent shows here, pretty much every show this week, and even last week after the Khalif Battle news broke, Gonzaga's got a 9-man rotation that is pretty locked and loaded right now. Ryan Nembhard, Nolan Hickman, Michael Ajayi, Ben Gregg, Graham Ike is your projected starting 5, with Khalif Battle, Braden Huff, Steele Venters, and Dusty Stromer coming off the bench. That is a 9-man rotation right there, and all those players deserve to play significant minutes for the Gonzaga Bulldogs next season. That does not include Junsook Yo, who is probably not going to get a significant amount of playing time, barring injuries, ineffectiveness, or a tremendous breakout from Yo over the offseason. So if Smith were to come to Gonzaga, he would immediately be the fourth guard. However, I expect Gonzaga to play a lot of 3-guard lineups next year. I believe that Hickman and Nembhard and Khalif Battle will all play together on the floor, probably more often than not. Battle's going to average over 20 minutes per game, and some of those minutes are going to be when Hickman or Nembhard, are on the bench, but I think the majority of the time, or at least a lot of the time, all 3 of those guys will play at once. That could potentially push Michael Ajayi to playing more small ball 4, could impact Ben Gregg's minutes a little bit. We'll see if they end up playing Ben at the 5 a little bit with Graham Ike. If he gets in foul trouble, obviously Braden Huff will mix in there quite a bit as well. This team is stacked. There's a ton of options at every position. I do think that a potential Braeden Smith addition, if it were to happen, a few things I think it could indicate. It's possible that Gonzaga is hedging their bets in case Michael Ajayi does stay in the NBA draft process. I think we've talked about Michael Ajayi being a potential NBA draft candidate for most of the last couple of shows because it's just come up organically in those conversations. But feeling like there's the potential that Ajayi is not actually going to come to Gonzaga would allow Gonzaga to add somebody like Braeden Smith and be more comfortable playing those 3-guard lineups where Battle's playing more at the 3 because you don't have that 6'7" starting wing player in Michael Ajayi. It could also be a hedging of potentially not having Steele Venters at full strength next season. Again, Venters suffered an ACL injury in November of last year. Those take a long time to recover from. He's not going to be at full speed in June during off-season workouts. He's probably not going to be at full speed at Craziness in the Kennel in October. And there's a reasonable chance he's not at full speed for the start or even the first half of the next college basketball season. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I'm not looking at his medicals. I don't want to pretend that I have any inside information about Steele Venters' current health. But I would say when there's smoke, there's fire. And if Gonzaga is aggressively continuing to pursue guards, it could be because there is some concern about the viability of Venters playing a significant role next year. It could also just be this is a player who's interested in coming to Gonzaga and you acquire talent whenever you can. And I think the biggest thing about this potential addition, Braeden Smith has 2 years of eligibility remaining. Khalif Battle does not. Nolan Hickman does not. Ryan Nembhard does not. All 3 of those players will not be on the Gonzaga Bulldogs in the 2025-26 season. If Gonzaga lands Braeden Smith in the transfer portal, he could be. Of course, he could enter the portal again if he wanted to, but my suspicion is if Gonzaga is pursuing Braeden Smith, that a lot of what they're selling him on is not, hey, come here and play a big role for us right away this upcoming season. It's come here, learn from Ryan Nembhard, learn from Nolan Hickman, who's been in the system for 4 years, develop behind the scenes, play a small role on a team that we feel is very capable of winning the national championship, and then start at point guard for the Gonzaga Bulldogs in 2025. That, I think, is the pitch. That's the sales pitch. Would he actually start? I don't know. It depends if they land Isaiah Harwell. It depends if they land any other players in the 2025 recruiting class, like Jalen Harrelson or Davis Fogel. It also depends on what transfers they would potentially bring in after Nembhard and Hickman depart. But if you go get Braeden Smith and you tell him to learn the system behind the scenes, learn from Ryan Nembhard, a prolific point guard, learn from Nolan Hickman, who's been in the system for 4 years, he's going to be incredibly equipped to start for this team as a senior in the 2025-26 season. I mean, he's already put up incredibly prolific stats at Colgate. He is a good, talented player. There's no debate about that. His ability to play at Gonzaga is not in question. Is he going to play over the 3 guards currently here? No. But he could learn from them, play a small role, and then be a starter, or at least a huge contributor as a senior. If that appeals to him and he's willing to come to Gonzaga and be a small role player in his first year and blossom into a bigger role in his second year, his final year of eligibility, you take that 99.9% of times out of 100 if you're Mark Few and the Zags. So we will see if this ends up developing into anything, if this is just conversations that are happening or what the situation is. But if this does happen and people are like, why are they adding another guard? What does this matter? Think about the fact that this is probably a move primarily made for the future as opposed to this upcoming season. Having said that, having a 4th guard who was a National Freshman of the Year candidate, it's pretty darn good. Pretty darn good to have that in the bag. Well, folks, we're going to talk about the women's basketball team and a point guard that they have just added via the transfer portal in Tayla Dalton coming over from St. Mary's. Always fun to steal some talent from the Gaels of Moraga. We're going to talk about that and this women's roster as it continues to come together, all coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you that today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by eBay Motors. Folks, passion, drive, patience, that's the winning formula for championships, and it's also what helps keep your ride or die alive. And eBay Motors has everything that you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers to roof racks, exhaust kits to LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. Plus, with over 122 million parts to choose from for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you get your money back. Because, folks, with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home that W. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply, and eBay's Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. All right, folks, segment 2, still any patents, still Locked On Zags podcast, and we're still talking transfer portal point guards. Just instead of talking about Braeden Smith and his potential addition for Mark Few and the Zags, we're going to talk about an actual addition made by Lisa Fortier and the Gonzaga women's basketball program, and that is Tayla Dalton. Tayla Dalton comes to Gonzaga from Moraga. She was a 4-year player at St. Mary's. However, the big connection here is that Dalton is from New Zealand. That is where Lauren Whittaker, who will be joining Gonzaga this upcoming season, she actually joined them at about mid-season, but was ineligible to play for the second half of the year. But she's been in Spokane, been with the team for the last half year. Lauren Whittaker is a dynamic, extremely talented player who's joining the Zags next year as a post player. And she's from New Zealand, and so is Tayla Dalton. So now they have a connection here, 2 players from New Zealand joining forces together. Dalton was a 4-year player at St. Mary's, and she started 82 games. She played 118 games, was a starter for 82 of them. So this is a big-time player coming from St. Mary's to Gonzaga. Again, St. Mary's is not the rivalry on the women's side that it is on the men's side. St. Mary's has never been particularly good at women's basketball. It's just not an area that they have really thrived the way that they have on the men's side, of course. Gonzaga's women's rivalries, Portland is probably the biggest one right now in the WCC, but it's still fun. It's still fun to take a player from St. Mary's, right? And more importantly, it's a really good addition and a needed addition for Lisa Fortier's team. They lost. The Trunk Twins are gone. Brenna Maxwell's gone. They had 3 guards enter the transfer portal in Callie Stokes and Peyton Muma and Naya Ojukwu. All of them are gone. They had to refill the backcourt cupboard in a major way. And getting a player who started 82 games in the WCC over the last 4 years is a pretty darn good place to start. Last season, Dalton averaged 10.1 points, 2.5 assists, 2.3 rebounds, and 1.7 steals for the Gaels. She shot just under 50% on 2-point shots, even 36% from 3. Not a high volume 3-point shooter, took less than 2 per game, but still shot 36%. You love to see that. She's also a 78% free throw shooter on the season. When Gonzaga played St. Mary's at home, when they hosted the Gaels, Dalton came into town and dropped 17 points on 7 of 11 shooting. One of the best performances we saw by a WCC player against Gonzaga, particularly at the Kennel. Certainly that had an influence on Lisa Fortier. Now, of course, Fortier has seen Dalton play for the last 4 years, so she knows how talented she is, and she knows what she's capable of bringing to this team. But her hanging 17 on the Zags on a super efficient night probably didn't help or didn't hurt her chances of ending up in a Gonzaga uniform as well. And now the return game in Moraga, not so good. Dalton had just 6 points and 5 assists in that one. But she finished the season really strong for the Gaels. She had 27 points at LMU. After that, the final 3 regular season games, she had 18 points, 17 points, and 15 points. Really strong finish to the season for Dalton at St. Mary's. Now she comes to Gonzaga. Coach Lisa Fortier spoke about her in a press release released by the Gonzaga athletic department after Dalton's commitment. Here's exactly what Coach Fortier said, quote, "We have gotten familiar with her game over the years, and she can really do a little bit of everything. She shoots the ball well from the perimeter and can play multiple guard positions. Tayla is a tough defender and a perfect culture fit. I love her confidence and leadership ability and cannot wait to coach her." Dalton joins Ines Bettencourt, a transfer from UConn, who spent the last 2 years with the Huskies but barely played. She's from Portugal initially. It's a little hard to know what Bettencourt's going to bring exactly just because she didn't really get on the floor in the last 2 years with the Huskies. But between adding Bettencourt and Tayla Dalton, you got to feel a lot better about what Gonzaga's backcourt is going to look like next season because they had a ton to replace, like we said. Replacing the Trunk Twins was always going to be difficult. They were so talented, so dynamic, so versatile in what they brought to this team. To also lose Brenna Maxwell, one of the best shooters in Gonzaga basketball history, bar none, to lose her is a tough loss as well. But now you add some significant pieces. Dalton is a clear and obvious starting caliber guard. In the WCC Bettencourt, a little bit less clear what her role might look like right away, but certainly Coach Fortier is not just adding her because she used to wear a UConn uniform. They obviously believe in her ability to contribute to this team, and the team still has multiple scholarships open. Like we said, Callie Stokes out the door. She's looking to play to join a track and field team instead of continuing her basketball career after suffering multiple concussions. Peyton Muma has transferred to Wyoming to join the Cowgirls. Naya Ojukwu entered the transfer portal. She barely played for Gonzaga last year after transferring in from Utah, but still another depth option that the Zags have lost. We don't know the status on Breece Allen-Bien, but it does not sound like she is going to play next year for Gonzaga, and she may be done playing basketball as well after suffering yet another knee injury. eligibility. So there's a lot of room for additions in Gonzaga's guard room in particular. And they're off to a phenomenal start, bringing in Dalton from St. Mary's and Bettencourt from UConn. Excited to see how these pieces come together for Coach Fortier as they look to build around Yvonne Ejim and have another fantastic season at the Kennel next year. Well, folks, Chet Holmgren did not receive a single first place vote for NBA Rookie of the Year. And frankly, that's okay. It's okay. We're going to talk more about that in just a second. Right after I tell you that today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. Folks, I have been told that I'm a competitive person, and it is true. I have a competitive side. We all do. And my competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It has been downloaded over 150 million times. It is a great twist on Monopoly where you play on not one, but hundreds of different Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. But the best part is getting to mess with my friends. I can charge them rent on my iconic properties, just like classic Monopoly, but now I can also rob their vaults of riches for myself. And the leaderboards show me who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is. But it's not just my competitive side that loves it. You can team up with friends and people all around the world in timed tournaments to earn huge rewards. So get in the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go now free on the App Store or the Google Play Store. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is also brought to you by Yahoo Finance. Folks, for many years, I had my own big financial spreadsheet. I was using it to try to track all of my various finances. It was so much time, so much effort, so much energy, just trying to keep up with it all. And I remember wishing that there was something that could just do it for me. And then my financial advisor told me he does everything I was trying to do by simply plugging it all into Yahoo Finance. I gave it a go and I've loved it. I've been using it all in ever since. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or just looking for extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data that you need in one place. Securely link your brokerage accounts for a unified view of your wealth, including your 401k and other investments. A comprehensive perspective is what sets apart great investors, and it's how Yahoo Finance ensures that you have the insight to look at your wealth in its entirety. With a community of over 90 million users each month, their real strength is helping you on your way to financial success. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com, the #1 financial destination, yahoofinance.com. Once again, that is yahoofinance.com. All right, folks, closing out the show today, talking Zags in the NBA, as we have done regularly here on the show throughout the NBA playoffs. We're going to start not in the playoffs necessarily. We're going to start with Chet Holmgren, who finished second in NBA Rookie of the Year voting. He received 98 second-place votes out of 99 total votes. Victor Wembanyama received every single first-place vote, unanimous Rookie of the Year selection. And look, we're going to talk about Chet. We're going to talk about how great his season was. But Victor Wembanyama was the deserving winner. I'm just going to say it. I was an advocate during the season for Chet to be the pick over Wemby, but at the end of the year, looking at the overall stats, the results, sure, Chet Holmgren's team had a better season. No debate about that whatsoever. Oklahoma City is the top seed in the Western Conference. San Antonio was nowhere close to being the top seed in the Western Conference. Chet Holmgren was also a more efficient scorer. He was a better three-point shooter percentage-wise. He was a better two-point shooter percentage-wise. But at the end of the day, Wembanyama was so dynamic and effective. Victor finished the year averaging 21.5 points, 10.6 boards, 4 assists, 3.6 blocks in 71 games. He led the NBA in block shots, and he averaged a 21.10 rebound double-double, averaged that. Chet Holmgren's numbers were great. 16.5 points per game, 7.9 rebounds, 2.4 assists, 2.3 blocks. He played all 82 games. I think that is a number that is not getting celebrated enough when talking about Chet Holmgren's accomplishments as a rookie. He played all 82 games after missing an entire season with a foot injury after years and years and years of people criticizing his size, his frame, his skinniness, saying he's too small, he's not strong enough, he's not big enough, he's too fragile, he's too frail. He played 82 games in his first NBA season. 11 more games than Victor Wembanyama played, for the record. Chet was 62.5% on two-pointers, 37% from three, about 80% from the free throw line. His field goal percentage of 59.8 was 19th in the NBA. His 63.2% true shooting percentage was 17th in the NBA. His 4.4 defensive win shares was 6th, and his 8.9 total win shares was 15th. By pretty much every measure, Chet Holmgren was a borderline top 20, top 25 player in the NBA. But Victor Wembanyama was just better. Just better. 21-10 as a rookie is obscene. 21-10 while leading the league in blocks as a rookie is obscene. It's just obscene. I have no problem with people voting Chet Holmgren second in Rookie of the Year voting. I think that's probably where he deserves to be. I do have a problem with somebody voting him third, however. One ballot, out of all of them, one ballot gave Chet Holmgren a third place vote instead of a second place vote and gave that second place vote to Brandon Miller. Look, Brandon Miller had a good year. He's a good player. He was better as a rookie than I thought he was going to be. I was skeptical about Brandon Miller being an immediately impactful player because he was good at Alabama, but a bit up and down. And I just wasn't sure it was going to translate to immediate success in the NBA. And it did. And shout out to him for that. Chet Holmgren was better than him in every facet of basketball last season. And he should have, there's no real logical reason to give Brandon Miller a second place vote over a third place vote. I know there was conversation of, oh, well, Chet actually, a lot of people who don't think he should be a rookie, who think if you get injured and miss your rookie season that you just no longer get to be eligible for Rookie of the Year. I don't subscribe to that. I think that's stupid. Ben Simmons is a situation similar to that. Blake Griffin was a situation similar to that. And if this person believed that, then in theory, they shouldn't have voted for Chet Holmgren at all. So just voting for him third instead of second, I don't really see what that accomplished. But whatever. Is it a big deal? No, of course not. But I think that Chet, most years, what Chet Holmgren did as a rookie, which not just statistically, but including being a key piece on a team that had as massive turnaround as the Oklahoma City Thunder did, would lead you to be Rookie of the Year. It's just not going to happen in a year whether you have a generational talent joining the NBA and Victor Wembanyama. Looking ahead to the Zags in the NBA playoffs, Jalen Suggs and Orlando were unfortunately eliminated by the Cleveland Cavaliers in Game 7. Suggs in that Game 7 shot 2 of 10 from 3. He still had 10 points and 9 boards, but Jalen really struggled away from home in this series against the Cleveland Cavaliers. He shot 11 of 23 at home from 3. 11 of 23 from distance. That is incredible. On the road, 3 of 25. It's the playoffs, baby. You got to be ready every game. You got to be able to bring it on the road. I'm not worried about Jalen Suggs long-term. He's still insanely young, and he had a tremendous breakout season, even got some votes for most improved player in all of the NBA. He's got an incredibly bright future ahead of him, and I'm excited to see him get his revenge next year in the playoffs. Andrew Nembhard and the Indiana Pacers have advanced to play the New York Knicks. They lost Game 1 in the Eastern Conference semifinals. Nembhard was 11 points, 4 assists, 2 boards on 4 of 10 shooting. He did not have a turnover, which means that right now, through Andrew Nembhard's first 7 games in the NBA playoffs, he has 32 assists and 5 turnovers. Absolutely elite. Where Andrew Nembhard is in his development right now as a rock-steady starting point guard for an NBA playoff team, an Eastern Conference semifinal team, unbelievable that he has developed to the point where he is already this level of contributor at that stage. Tremendous stuff from Nembhard. Game 2 in that series is Wednesday at 5 p.m. Pacific time. Julian Strawther got his first NBA playoff action. Not a particularly happy reason. It's because the Denver Nuggets got smoked, absolutely crushed by the Minnesota Timberwolves in Game 2 of their series. Denver hosted the first 2 games of this series and got blasted in both of them. They lost Game 2 106-80. Do you know how rare it is to hold an NBA team to 80 points? Is the fewest points that Denver has scored all season long. Minnesota did this without Rudy Gobert, a future Hall of Fame player entirely because of his defense. And he was not with Minnesota. He was with his wife for the birth of their daughter. He misses the game, and Denver gets held to 80 points. Insane to see that happen in the NBA. It is very bad news for Denver. There's a chance. Their next 2 games are in Minnesota. If they don't win one of those, they're done. They are done for the season. Strawther played 3.5 minutes in blowout garbage time in this game. He did score 2 points, both from the free throw line. We'll see if he gets any more playoff action. Probably would only happen in more garbage time situations, but obviously we will look to see Julian gradually get more playing time as his career progresses with the Denver Nuggets going forward. It's going to wrap it up for us today here on the Locked On Zags podcast. I want to thank all of you who have made this show your first listen or your first watch of the day. We'll be back later in the week, continuing our season in review series, getting you ready for a final weekend or an upcoming weekend of baseball for the Gonzaga baseball team. And of course, keeping you up to date on any more transfer or recruiting news as it comes along. Thanks for listening. And until next time, as always, go Zags.